The team said that if a deal could be done in time, there would be a press conference to announce it on the Thursday before the first race. But both Boutsen and second driver Eric Comas, who hadn't done a single lap in the 1992 car, that's Comas, were travelling as well. And Comas would step in if Prost didn't race. Frank Durney has said on several occasions that everybody in the race team assumed Prost was going to be the lead driver in South Africa, and that a car was sent out there set up for him with his seat and pedals arrangement. Then on the Tuesday before the race, Prost and Ligier released a statement saying an agreement had not been reached in time for round one, but negotiations were continuing and a deadline for a definitive decision was set for March the 16th, which sat neatly between the first two races of the year. Karun, how did you feel when the news broke that Prost wouldn't be racing in the season opener? You can obviously give us the fan perspective.
Conflicted, because on one hand, I wanted to see, Prost on the grid, and I was like, oh God, who am I going to cheer for? And actually, I didn't. I found myself cheering for anybody but Senna, basically, in '92. But on the flip side, somewhat relieved because I didn't want to see, Prost driving around in the midfield. Just in a midfield car. So that I felt at the time was beneath him.
Ed, regular listeners to the show will know that you're obsessed with this idea of the French super team. At the time, were you still hopeful, given they'd come up with this deadline extension, were you hopeful that a deal would be done for round two?
Yeah, I'm not sure at the time because I remember it very, very quickly settling into it being a Prost sabbatical. I suspect that certainly if I was following today, I would be very, very cynical about it and think, yeah, this isn't going to happen. If you're not there, if it's not done for the first race, it's not going to happen. I guess maybe at the time we thought it was possible because it's still being talked of. But these things, if they don't happen when they should happen, have a tendency not to. And it's clear that Prost was hanging on for something. So that was the key thing, wasn't it? It was about far more, and I'm sure I didn't appreciate this properly at the time. This wasn't just about, does Alain Prost want to drive for Ligier? It wasn't about that, because of course he didn't want to drive for Ligier. There were certain conditions and reasons why he would be willing to drive for Ligier that wouldn't be met. And if they'd not been met when they could have been done for the start of the season, despite the amount of interest and column inches it was getting, I think it was always going to be difficult to see it happening later on. But yeah, you never know. It's always possible. I imagine Prost was very pleased that he'd set out his stall. Probably on the Ligier side, they thought, oh, he'll start off and we'll see how it all comes together. But Prost was line in the sand, right, I get what I want from this deal or I am not in that car. So, yeah, probably it was doomed from this point.
So, between the first two races, the Prost-Ligier deal was officially called off. Prost said he would have driven for the team for free, but he was reported to be pushing for 6-year commitments from all of Ligier's sponsors, as that was how long he felt the team needed to be turned into a front-running force. But when this level of financial backing wasn't forthcoming, Prost declared it unworkable. He said he would have been able to bring in the right people on the technical and organisational side to enable the team to climb to the highest level, but that would have been expensive. And he added, to compete at the top level in Formula One, you need the best of everything and you cannot compromise. Speaking later in the year to Nigel Roebuck, Prost said he changed his mind when he saw the realities of the Ligier situation and all the difficulties involved, and then decided he would take a year off and prepare for 1993 instead. Ed, ignoring the fact that Prost ends up driving a Williams in 1993, when you look in isolation at the decision he made to back away from this project in March 1992, was that a smart move based on what he was saying there about funding and resources?
Yeah, undoubtedly. There's probably two reasons for that. Firstly, Prost's own personal reasons. As I've said, he wanted basically to get a controlling stake in the team. He wanted significant backing behind it. So that was his end game. That was the basis on which he was willing to drive for the team. It wasn't about what he'd do in 92. It was about the longer term, and realised in his dream he'd already tried to do a French super team and get John Barnard involved in it a few years ago. So this was very much something he had in mind. And the second one is, if you just look at how much needed to be done with Ligier, if you speak to anyone who was involved in it, they all say the same thing about that. It was a very politically ravaged team. It wasn't well integrated. It wasn't a modern Grand Prix team. So there needed to be that significant spending in order to get it up to a decent level. So if he was going to drive for it and really commit to the project, even if he was willing to accept, say, a 50-50 split, which I doubt he would have done, then he would have needed to see a clear pathway, clear progress to actually get this team to a level where it could compete with the likes of Williams and McLaren. And remember, it's not just catching that up, it's also keeping pace with the development those teams are going to make in the 90s. So there was a huge amount that wasn't right about the Ligier opportunity. And I think his was an all or nothing attempt. It's like, I'm going to get the team, we're going to get the interest, we're going to get the French government to put pressure on companies, we're going to get all these francs pouring into the team to really, really do it properly. And if it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. I'm going to walk away. And I think he was wise to do so.
Guy Ligier wasn't quite so willing to let the idea of a French super team die. When the deal was formally called off, he said he was disappointed that the conditions could not be met, but he remained committed to finding a way to make it work. He said he would be skipping the upcoming races to continue working on this idea, saying this project has such magnitude, it is something which demands much negotiation, investment and understanding. He said Prost remained an important element of the plans, and he hoped there were still possibilities for them to work together. He said the idea of a French national team was close to his heart, regardless of if he was involved or not once it was set up. And he said he would continue to fight to make it happen. Prost disagreed slightly with Ligier's vision. He said in the summer of 92 that while he liked the idea of having a team based in France using French engines, he never liked the idea of having a French Formula One team. And he was quite consistent with that when he did take this team over later on, and it ended up with French engines and it all went horribly wrong. But let's look at Guy Ligier for a minute here. Was he perhaps a little too committed to this idea of a French national team?
I think so. I think, he in one sense you kind of admire it because, obviously Ligier had success. If you rewind to about a decade from before what we're talking about here, they were still in amongst it, weren't they? Late 70s, early 80s, the Ligier was competitive, was winning races, and people like Didier Pironi were competitive in the cars. And he was clearly a very patriotic man, and he wanted to restore it to its past glory. And I'm sure he was annoyed by the fact that the British teams were basically dominating F1 at this time in Williams and McLaren. Ferrari hadn't really won any championships for a long time now, so I'm sure that annoyed him a bit more. But yeah, objectively, he clearly got swept up in all of this a bit too much.
I think just to pick up on the point about Prost not being so keen on a French Formula One team, I think what Prost liked about it was it seemed very, very convenient from a financial perspective to get all the French companies on board. I think that's what he liked. And then he could, have a French-based team, but an international team. He talked in the past as well about how much he liked British teams, the way they communicate and work. So I think Guy Ligier's vision was a more patriotic vision. Prost's vision was, I think, a purely pragmatic one. He was a superstar in France. Who else better to draw in the backing and the money to actually make this thing work? I think that was what Prost's view of the French national team element of it was. But it would be an international team, but with that French money underpinning it.